Beijing media recently reported on the existence of what they called well dwellers in the capital. In fact, the subjects of these reports are people living in underground spaces, often places housing heating pipes or other urban infrastructure, and accessed by manhole covers. Now, most of the inhabitants are elderly people who've fallen on hard times, or migrant workers who've come to the city and can't afford conventional housing. They use plastic tarpaulins or even cardboard to line the earth and to provide some sort of insulation against damp and dust. For light, they tend to use candles, and they use nearby public washroom and toilet facilities. One of the most cited reports featured a man named Wang Xiuqing. He told the Beijing Morning Post he'd lived under the city's central Chaoyang district for 10 years in an underground area of just around 30 square feet. To make a living, he washes cars, and Wang said he moved into the space to avoid rising rent and to save money to pay for his 3 children's education. He also owes money for fines incurred for having more than one child. He and a number of other well-dwellers showed reporters their homes, which ironically are under some of the most expensive real estate in the city. However, the media revelations quickly led the city authorities to evict the unofficial tenants and cement up the manhole covers they used as their front doors. While Wang has received an offer of work and accommodation elsewhere, many of the other well-dwellers have not been so lucky. To see how China's online community is reacting to the story, let's head over now to our researcher, Julia Liu. So, Julia, first from what you've seen online, could you fill us in with a little bit more detail on just who these well-dwellers are and how they live, and of course, Chinese net users' reaction to this story?
Sure. Well, I've seen reports of well-dwellers ranging from over 70 down to kids of just 4 years old. And their accommodation is generally pretty basic. As you might expect, worn-out quilts, shabby old clothes, a few bowls and cups, and maybe preserved vegetables. That's all they own. And they live surrounded by rusty heating pipes, wires and concrete, or sometimes earthen walls. The main protagonist of that report you mentioned, Wang Xiuqing, says the reality is that they are concerned more about survival than dignity or comfort. While many net users have picked up on the contrast in modern China that these reports highlight. Cai Shenkun says, at a time when we are launching moon probes, human beings are still living in the dark and dirt under manholes in the glitzy capital city. This is real life and is happening around us. I can't help but sigh at the stark contrast. While other net users can understand the financial desperation that leads to choosing such a life, Wang Chuanyan has said this on Sina.com. If they had just a few hundred yuan to spare, they could maybe live in the basement. But the manholes are more attractive as they're totally free. They even disregard the conscious danger that living there means. While Lu Wenjiang feels that the case highlights several problems. The pathetic scene of people living under manholes may not be common, but it is a symptom of the feeling in our society. Difficulty in providing for the aged, difficulty in providing employment, difficulty in ensuring the welfare of migrant workers.
But in terms of migrants or the elderly, as most of these people seem to be, are there really no other more dignified solutions available? Returning home, say, for those who live outside Beijing, or at least refuges or shelters for the homeless. They do exist, don't they? I mean, have net users mentioned any of those options?
Well, this is actually an issue which has sparked a quite heated discussion online. And Wang Xiuqing says they are often told to go homeless shelters, but since they just get food there, he can't make money to support his whole family. So they prefer the freedom of living underground. As Beijing News reports, this group of people may be of different ages, from different places, and have different problems in life. What they have in common is that, unlike beggars, they make a living by working and refuse to accept handouts. And a poster on Sina.com views their refusal is understandable, saying, well, normally the refugees only offer temporary food and accommodation, and then a train or bus ticket to send them away. Well, their underlying problems are not resolved, since what they need is a long-term guarantee of livelihood. Li Xingwen has something to say on this too, and he says, these struggling well-dwellers should make us think carefully about how inadequate our social welfare system is for those who live at the bottom of the social hierarchy. While with the widening of the gap between rich and poor nowadays, the importance of improving the social security system is even greater.
Okay, then finally, what's the general feeling there about how these people's lives have been affected by this whole report, the media coverage and the sudden public attention?
Not very positively is the answer in most cases. As you mentioned, the direct result was that the officials rushed to seal the wells up, so the dwellers found that they had lost their homes overnight. Wang Xiuqing was one of the few lucky ones, maybe because he was the one most written about. With all the publicity, he received a number of offers and has just accepted a job with a university in Beijing, which offers decent pay and accommodation. But there's been no mention of the fate of other well dwellers since then. And this poster explains some of the arguments that this has raised. Well, the original intention of the report was to raise awareness of the poor living conditions of such people. But in fact, it's just caused them to become homeless. This has triggered discussion on the ethics of reporting such cases. Well, even some working in the media have concluded that there are situations where reporters should not interfere. And others have targeted the reaction of the Beijing's government officials. An Xinzi on ChinaNews.com has this ironic take. Well, people can't afford to live above ground, and they're not allowed to live below ground. Maybe they should just suspend themselves in mid-air. Well, Di Zhirhuo from Henan has this criticism. Well, all the officials care about is a superficial appearance of prosperity and avoiding troublesome complaints against them. The livelihood of these people is certainly not something that bothers them. But finally, there are those who feel the burden of responsibility should be spread a bit wider. And this poster from Zhejiang says, well, our whole society bears the responsibility for helping these impoverished people. It's not only the government's duty.
Okay, thanks for that, Julia. And that was China Take researcher Julia Liu with some of the online reaction to those recent reports on those well dwellers, people living under the ground in urban spaces in Beijing, most of whom now have been ejected from their homes. Next up on China Take, some of the top trending phrases on China's most popular search engines.